the conversation to the audience now, to any of the panelists, some ways in which you have some kind of question or comments, but if you want to say that into anything we talked about today.
Thank you, Trayvon, again for very enlightening and sad. But what it brings to mind to me is this tension between the habitual narrative of our history and that we've been here before, we've talked this before, the itself, Gail, John Bell, you can go on and on. And then, so that's the habitual narrative that prevents us from healing, because it's a sword that is open, and then it's always poured on it rather than healed. And the other thing, the versus that, is that hypothetical. And I think that is what is out in the larger world, these questions that come up. How could it be done this? And how did it, all these kinds of questions that you see from right-wing radio. So you have those competing narratives, in a sense, and you feel really pushed upon in terms of, rather than a unit of healing, as Walter has said, these roots of healing keep getting interrupted by these habitual narratives that keep recurring. And so in terms of, as you said, Walter, about these roots of healing, how do you get there from a point of injustice? And that is, to me, the kind of larger frame around this. And you also mentioned literary analysis and literary descriptions of this, and it's throughout Black literature, but I'm reminded again of Morris and Betty Suggs and her sermon about self-love. Because when you bring up the fact that what happens in Chicago, that a young Black girl is murdered on the same day, the right wing wants to say, why don't you deal with that? Why do you only deal with this? And so it's a complex situation that we all need to have something that I think about Betty Suggs preaching about self-love. You have to love yourself. And it's not only the privileged people who have that privilege or that racism. It's also in what we call low economic, in terms of that internalized racism. So it should broadly apply to all of us. So this is not so much a question as is I'm trying to process all of the frames that you so excellently given us. And I wish we could find that route of healing, but justice, I think this is a demand that is in our priority.
Well, let me just say real quickly about that justice is as much about imagination as self-love, right? And I think that's why I want to go to thinking and talking about how we imagine ourselves. Because, in one situation, on the South Side on Thursday, in the middle of the afternoon, people in a store, it was like an electronics store, somebody ran in, gun clapping, ran out, drove away. One of those young men who was hit but didn't die is Wayne Wade's nephew. Wayne Wade gets the call that his nephew has been shot about an hour before he has to go play. He's playing in a tank top and shirt. He is exceptionally muscled, 6'4", 215 pounds, and we relish his athletic ability. And we love that body. So that's another kind of confusion, right? Because here's one body that makes it out, that is celebrated, and here's another body that stays with 1 degree separated, right? That stays and is in a perpetual danger zone. Okay? So, here's one of these weird cases where privilege ought to excuse that body at least from the danger, but doesn't, right? And so I think, there's something happening in these very dangerous urban and rural circumstances where, basically kids think that no other life is more significant than theirs. Theirs isn't valued anyway, so if I take that life, it doesn't matter. That's the same concept in part that's functioning that says that body doesn't matter, I have privilege, thus I can take it out because it's displaced. I'm removing it from an environment where it ought not be. So how do we address that imagination problem to get to those routes of healing? Unless we can imagine, that's the only way we can.
Can speak to it, because I want to go back to the conversation about privilege, as if privilege creates racism, and maybe I misheard that. But it seems to me that there's another dynamic here that is missing, and that's the dynamic of power. Because Walter, you raised the question about how someone like Dwayne Wade, who is privileged, could be the victim of the thing his nephew was a victim of. One person gets that, right? So, in thinking about that in relationship to black athletes, what makes Dwayne Wade special in popular culture that he has money, he's an athlete, right? So money has never given black people equal privilege. If we think about the way we privilege function in this society, right? So when you talk about privilege is relative, is it not? Like freedom is relative, right? So how do you see this notion of privilege, which I hear, and I may be mishearing, so you can clarify, being used interchangeably in some way with racism? So Nicole's statement is racism is based on privilege. That's your statement, right, Nicole? Yeah? So I think privilege is a derivation of racism, and both is rooted in power. And who has the power to negotiate and to impose certain ideas and certain things. So where does power stand in this discussion of everybody who's privileged operating in some kind of racist kind of way?
Okay, I'll make this quick. Thank you for the opportunity to clarify. I think privilege is all about power, and that economic side of power, or that can go essential to it. I am drawing on, and I embrace Barbie's definition of racism as the naturalization of existing inequalities. So you have inequalities, they are inequalities of power, and they are in our world system based on economics. And ideology heeds to justify those inequalities. So we then have these systems that come to appear natural. We invent these structures, one of which we call race, to explain, to have as alibis for these inequalities. So, for example, if you believe someone who did the crime should do the time, that is one of the central tenets of the ideology of the criminal justice system. And it's a profoundly racist system, so that's a racist ideology. So if you believe that, you are helping to perpetuate the basis of racism today. Racism changes over time. It's not the same now as it was in slavery. Right now, the systems of inequality that we're looking to justify have to do with urban, rural distribution of life opportunity and other class-based inequalities. They're created profoundly. They're profoundly exacerbated by the criminal justice system, which impoverishes people, makes them sick, destroys their communities, and circulates the ideas that allow us to write off such a large percentage of especially brown and black young men. So if racism is the naturalization of existing inequalities. It's all about power.
It's not about the naturalization of existing inequalities. We have to go back to the very idea of when race was created. We have to go back to scientific racism and medical racism and the ways in which the religious and cultural institutions of our nation were used to basically consolidate power. And so since the naturalization of race and racial categories were imputed upon people who were in a slavery system, people who were stolen from their homes. So it wasn't necessarily, there was a time when we had free Negroes in America who had status. They were not considered free as human beings. There were also, in the same time, these slave Negroes. But there was in, late 19th century, a move to naturalize the phenotypic differences between whites and everybody else. And it occurred with other groups at earlier times. And so I actually would argue that this is not a chicken and egg problem. We're not in a moment of chicken and egg and which call which. We're in a moment of what to do next. We really are in the moment of what to do next.
And I'm very concerned about Trayvon Martin becoming this exceptional case, which he has become in the media, and at the same time, this extreme outpouring of empathy in the kind of way that, as Cynthia Herman would say, raises Trayvon Martin. In this whole I am Trayvon Martin, it happened a couple of months ago when I am Davis, and I'm sure the person may know. The way I see it is that in a couple of months, we continue along the same kind of trajectory. In a couple of months, people will bring a hoop. And we'll still have the same problem because as far as we're concerned, this is an exceptional case. It happens to this one black boy. And for the moment, we are all him, so we can sit here and quarrel and complain about all of the injustices we face. And we sit in forums like this, and we talk about it, and we talk until we're blue. But what happens after all of the talking? And we continue to use the same kind of formula that doesn't work. It's the same kind of formula that the justice system is built off of. That a few people who have the knowledge, who have the information, sit and talk about it, and then nothing happens. It shows from, as you were saying, that there is a common sense about what has happened in this case, but this justice system does not go for the common man. Therefore, you have to go to the lady or whatever in the court, lady justice in the court, and have not one person, the jury, and one person make that kind of decision. And I don't know, I'm not giving any kind of solution, or I'm making a criticism of all of us, but really not knowing where to go next, because I don't know how we begin to dismantle something that is so very much ingrained in us, even our very thinking about how to dismantle it is grounded upon that very same system.
I take your point, and let's take that, combined with the last couple of comments I had, and then I think directed to certain people on the panel who address these issues. Shannon, talked about the perfect victim, and we're trying to figure out what's special about Trayvon Martin. Because we talked about this case is not being exceptional. Walter, we talked about black life and being cheap, even in an interracial context when it comes to black violence. And then Plug Play, we talked about the democracy now and how information is disseminated. So with all that being said, I would be here. We're all known on Facebook and Twitter. And even it's how we communicate, right? We use many ways, we need to be very careful about the ways we talk about this. So as we go ahead in our semi-passive way and post about this on Facebook later on today, or talk about it on social networking sites, I want to know, to Walton, how do we talk about this without betraying our own participation in Black life? But still acknowledging that racism is part of this conversation. Nicole, how do we talk about this in a way without making Trayvon Martin seem exceptional, but still talking about it in the context of Amadou Diallo, for example, and the others that we did this, which we did try to raise consciousness about those kinds of issues too at the rally last week. And then finally with Shannon, how do we talk about this without over-articulating our experience as you're working for me as an activist in this organization, or professional activist? So how do we do this without making this all about us and making it about Americans? I don't know if you have any answers for that, but I think that's where we can go forward. continue this conversation outside this room.